Hey, my wife and I have a few kids, and just in preparation for this session, I was remembering a time about 2 years ago, and my middle boy, who was 6 years old at the time, his name was Willis. What are you talking about, Willis? Was standing there in the kitchen with my wife. It was about 5:30 at night, and my wife suddenly realised that our daughter, so we've got one girl and 4 boys, that my daughter hadn't come back from school. She'd come back home early and then gone back up and played, and she said to Willis, she was getting a bit concerned, she said to him, we don't know where Willis is, maybe we don't know where Annabelle is, maybe we need to go and look for her. To which he calmly replied to her, Mum, I wouldn't worry about it. If she's gone, she's gone. Then upon further reflection went on to say, oh, that's right, she's your only girl, we better go find her, I'll go look. But his initial dispassionate his lack of concern for her and his dismissal of her, whilst perhaps being illustrative of the way his little mind works, did make me think that in the early years that I was getting involved in public policy, that was all too often the approach that I saw within, certainly heavily weighted on one side of the political spectrum in public policy, but also all too often within churches. There seemed to be a certain understanding, I would argue misunderstanding, of human freedom. So starting with the question of what does it mean to be a human being, which was raised yesterday in the economics panel by a couple of the members there, I think is an excellent place to start any public policy discussion. That beginning with that question and then flowing through to the answer of freedom and therefore responsibility that flows from that freedom and the relationships that do or do not affect that the view all too often taken was one of seeing the individual as being entirely rational, as being an individual who was making his or her own decisions and needed just to be held completely accountable for them. And so therefore you ended up all too often with this very hard, I would say very hard approach to criminal justice. And so as Maxim Institute began to engage in this area around about 4 years ago, it was an enormous privilege to get to know Kim Workman, who I think I'm going to introduce in a few minutes' time, just as basically living legend in this area of criminal justice work. I'm not aware of anyone in New Zealand who's done the amount of extraordinary work that he has. And as I've walked with Kim and as we've gotten more involved in our work at Maxim Institute, I've come to realise that out of any public policy area, I think this one of criminal justice is one that we can have the greatest hope for real change, real agreement, real progress in the next few years. And that's what we want to explore over the next hour and 25 minutes. So it's going to be the normal progress program that we've been following these last couple of days. So do note down those questions, and towards the end of this we'll have an opportunity to engage. But I know that that's going to be one of the things that's going to come through. It's just a sense of real hope that we are starting to see change across the political spectrum in Wellington, and that the churches have started to play an important role on this. They've always been at the forefront of it, and just a challenge that we can do even more. So first of all today we're going to hear from Jackie Katunas, who is currently the head of Restorative Justice Services at Prison Fellowship New Zealand. Over to you, Jackie. We're going to start with the DVD first of all. Okay, we'll play a 3-minute DVD and then Jackie will come straight up.
next thing I remember is a lot of screaming, and I was in the back of the come in and said, oh, you've killed one person, and then about a quarter of an hour later, come no, there's 2 died, and then within half an hour I was told I was killed 3 people. I'm so sorry.
I can honestly say I wasn't angry. I wasn't angry at you. Because I didn't want what you had done to invade my whole life. You know, like, I didn't want to be bitter about it. I grieve, and I will always grieve for the loss of a beautiful daughter. And can't replace her. I can't replace the dynamics of my daughters and the family unit. But I'm not going to let that engulf my life for the rest of my life, you know. And part of me saying to you today, you know, that I forgive you, to me is powerful for me. It's releasing for me.
It's a big call.
I'm just in a different place when I walked in here, and I should really have to thank you. I should be saying sorry. You know, it just doesn't seem right to say thank you, but by God, I'm sorry, but thank you.
So much. I didn't not think that was going to happen. I just felt, when you said, I forgive you, it just lifted. I can't explain it, it's weird.
Kia ora. As you know, my name is Jackie Katunis, and I'm currently the Manager of Restorative Justice Services for Prison Fellowship New Zealand. However, 20 years ago I was a $1,200 a day heroin addict, not long released from an Australian jail and struggling to go straight. In the past, my pattern had certainly been to go straight, but as always, straight back to my old ways and the only way of life I knew, straight back to mixing with other offenders and career criminals, and eventually straight back to prison. In those years I had little respect for myself and little respect for others. My life was anything but guided by Christian values or gospel principles. Although even in the criminal world there is such a thing as loyalty, trust and concern for others, albeit they are distorted and self-serving values. So what made a difference in my life? For me, what led to a change of heart and in turn a complete change in lifestyle was my own personal experience of restorative justice. As an ex-offender and ex-prisoner, I am grateful that I was offered forgiveness by one of my victims at a time in my life when I was struggling to go straight and needed to face the consequences of my actions. For the first time in my life, I took responsibility for my wrongdoing, and it was this frightening but life-changing first step that ultimately led me on my journey to embrace Christian values and seek out a faith community where I would be supported and guided to maintain the changes in my life. Still to this day, I remember how awkward and tentative I felt when I first went to church. Many parishioners avoided me altogether. Others eyed me with suspicion and yes, even fear. I often felt sidelined and out of place. Admittedly, many of these feelings stemmed from my own fears, uncertainties and inadequacies. As I look back now, I wonder what it was that stopped so many of these so-called people of faith from reaching out to me with trust and compassion. Fortunately, a small group of Christians did welcome me and enabled me to embrace Christianity with a fervour that has persevered despite the lack of total acceptance. I needed this in order to learn to forgive myself, to regain a measure of respectability and to find a new place of acceptance in society. However, what saddens me most as a Christian is how selective many Christians can be when it comes to dealing with those who are marginalised, hurting and angry at life. I have been in those places, and even though offenders are quick to blame everyone and everything except themselves, they need what Christianity stands for. They need people who can forgive, who can offer them opportunity to change, who are there when they fail and keep encouraging them despite their setbacks and despair. I often wonder, where is our duty of care as Christians in relation to people like myself? Don't say to me, "Oh, but Jackie, you're different." Had I not found a small group of true friends who actually believed in me and gave me chances, challenged me and encouraged me, I doubt that I would be standing here today. Yes, I am different now, but that has been a long, slow journey, and I still battle at times with my own demons and struggle to live by Christian values and principles. Not all of those friends who reached out to me are churchgoers or Christians by name, but they are compassionate and caring people who are trying, like the prophet Micaiah said, to live justly and love tenderly. What surprises me most is how lacking in justice and tenderness we can be as communities of faith, how harsh and punitive many Christians are, and how slow and fearful we can be to embrace the values and principles of restorative justice. Look at me if you doubt that people can change for the better. Look at me if you are sceptical that offenders can turn their lives around. My life is as bad as it gets. The reason I am passionate about restorative justice is because it threw me a lifeline at a time in my life when I could have drowned. It gave me a reason to get my life back on track. You may well be inclined to think that my perspective is biased since I experienced restorative justice from an offender perspective. However, the reason I am so passionate about restorative justice is because I have also seen firsthand and on numerous occasions the benefits of restorative justice for victims as well. While participation in a restorative justice conference and the road to forgiveness is certainly not an easy option for victims or offenders, it can be equally life-changing and empowering for both. Two families in Morrinsville just recently met with a young woman whose careless driving killed their loved ones. While they are no doubt still hurting and angry and filled with grief, the victims' families were offered the opportunity to meet with the offender. Not an easy option for any of them, so soon after the tragedy. Oh, that this would happen more often. I have absolutely no doubt that both her family and theirs will be further along the path of healing than any of them would have been had they have been kept apart and prevented from meeting to share their hurt and grief. Restorative justice is certainly not just about offenders. For restorative justice to be effective, it needs victim participation, and in many cases it is the victims who drive and enable the process to happen. This is also what saddens and frustrates me about the Sensible Sentencing Trust, whose apparent efforts to support victims can so easily disempower and discourage them from experiencing the benefits that can result from a restorative justice conference. The ability for victims to express their pain to those who have caused it, and to begin to move forward in their grieving and healing process. For me, restorative justice is a no-brainer. It is one of the most powerful avenues I know to live my Christian faith, and needs to be more than just an antidote to the punitive and retributive system that still dominates our society. We as Christians could lead the way if we could just recognise and accept that all offenders are products of our society, and that most of those in prison today will eventually return to live in our communities. We so desperately need to explore new ways to deal with both victims and offenders of crime in our society if we are to bridge the gap that polarises us from one another. Maybe Bernard Shaw was right in his day when he asked why Christianity hadn't worked. His answer, Christianity hasn't failed, it just hasn't been tried. Restorative justice hasn't failed, and in too many cases, it just hasn't been tried. Thank you.